The sea village of Gull's Rest curled around a cove like a sleeping cat. Winter storms were common, but the people were used to wind and waves. At the point stood the old lighthouse, its stones pitted by salt and time, its lamp tended by Arden, a quiet keeper with a stitched coat and thoughtful eyes. The townsfolk said Arden had once been a sailor who lost someone he loved to the sea and found this work as a kind of vow. Arden had an assistant, Leah, a fisher's daughter who loved the lighthouse because it felt like a promise that the night could be navigated. She learned the rituals, cleaned the lens, polished the brass, checked the fuel, wind the mechanism, record the weather, and most of all, light on time. One evening, black clouds piled like mountains beyond the horizon. The wind changed from chatter to growl. Fishermen hauled boats onto higher ground and tied shutters. Leah glanced at the barometer. It felt like a coin into a well. "Will it hit us?" she asked. Arden studied the line where sky and sea became the same shade. "It already has," he said softly. "We just haven't felt it yet." By nightfall the storm arrived. Rain slashed sideways. Waves shouldered the breakwall. The lighthouse shook as if remembering an old injury. Leah and Arden checked the lamp twice, then 3 times. Outside, the village flickered. A fishing sloop that hadn't returned in time bobbed like a cork beyond the bar. Hours into the gale, a sudden boom echoed from below. The lamp faltered, then dimmed. Leah's breath snapped. "Fuel line!" she shouted. Arden was already moving. "Winds forced water into the housing," he called. "We need to seal and relight fast." They worked by memory. The wind stole their hearing. Leah's hands trembled as she fitted wicks, wiped moisture, and held a match like a promise between her fingers. The match hissed out. She lit another. Her fear said, "What if we're too late?" Her training answered, "Do the next right thing." The flame caught, then breathed wider, settling into a steady glow. The lens threw it into the dark in long turning sheets. Leah leaned against the wall, dizzy with relief. Arden pointed through the glass. "Look, far out, a small light blinked once, twice then vanished behind a wave. The sloop." If the lamp failed again, the sailors would search for a star that wasn't there. The storm, insulted by their success, struck harder. The lighthouse groaned. A log slammed the lower door. Leah thought of warm kitchens, of blankets, of sleep. Instead she made tea on the little iron stove, and they drank in silence, listening to the building argue with the wind. Every 30 minutes they checked the lamp, wiped the lens, and wound the mechanism. Leah wrote in the log, "Hour 2. Light steady. Fear steady too. Doing the work anyway." Near dawn, the storm relented, not quickly, but honestly, like someone admitting a truth. The clouds thinned to ragged lace. The sea, offended but calmer, rolled in long gray shoulders. A whistle sounded from the cove. The sloop, scarred but afloat, nosed toward safety. When the crew stumbled ashore, people cried and laughed at once. One of the sailors lifted a hand toward the lighthouse and bowed clumsily. Back at the tower, Arden poured more tea and stared at the lamp, now ordinary as a kettle. Leah's eyelids sagged. "I kept thinking," she murmured. "What if the flame dies when someone needs it most?" Arden nodded. "That's every keeper's fear. But fear isn't the job. The job is the routine, small, faithful acts done on time, especially when you feel least capable. The sea respects that." Leah touched the warm brass. "Then hope is maintenance?" He smiled. "Hope is the discipline of lighting when it matters and before it does." Word spread that the lighthouse had burned, steady through the worst night in a decade. The mayor offered a commendation. Arden accepted for Leah, who wrote the log and held the match. She kept the commendation in a drawer, but taped a different line on the wall above her bunk. In the storm, keepers don't feel brave. They feel responsible. Years later, when Leah became the head keeper, she taught new assistants the same rhythm. Clean, check, light, record. "You don't wrestle the storm," she told them. "You keep the lamp, moral, in chaos." Hope isn't a feeling, it's a practice duty. The next right small act, done faithfully.